Hello, hello, and welcome in a new episode of or in Engineering with Mina. And this is a new episode of like Rust Practice. And in this tutorial, or in this new tutorial, I'll try to solve a problem, a simple problem. We write a function together that tries to get the largest element in a list of elements. And let me write the problems. So the problem that we are trying to solve is getting the max or largest element from a list of elements. And if you notice that I'm using element, I didn't specify a specific type, and we will try also to avoid any code duplication, and it should work with different data types. What does this mean? This means we need a function. Let me color it in orange. In this function, I might call it like max. And this function should accept, like we will start with a simple concrete argument with maybe list of items, and this will be of type vector and integer 32, and this is the start, and we will refactor it together to avoid having a concrete data type. Instead of that, we will just make it work with a generic data type. So we'll touch on Rust generics. For example, I can pass it like a float 64 or a list of characters or chars. And this is the end goal of this tutorial. So a quick recap, we will build a simple function that gets the largest element of a list of elements. We won't use a concrete data type, we'll use Rust generics, and we shouldn't duplicate any code. Let's start building that. So I'll go to my Rust directory, and then I'll go to the demos one. I'll use cargo new. I'll call it max just for simplicity, and then I'll cd using max. I open my VS Code, and as usual, I like to start with testing that everything is working fine. So I just run cargo run, and looks good. And now I'll go to my main. I'll delete this. I'll write my function. It's a very simple function that will accept an argument list of items. And as I mentioned, we will start with a vector. I'll pass it a vector reference for a vector of type i32, integer 32, and this should return a reference to i32 as well. And for item, let's iterate on them. Yeah, I need here to define the mutable max, and this of i32 equals to 0. Or let me remove the type here just for a second. No, sorry. I need to get the first element of the list. So list of items, I will use get for like to have a safe getter from the vector 0, and safe return an option. This won't work with the comparison because I need a reference for i32. So you have so many options. I can simply use unwrap, and now I'm like, because I've studied more stuff, I know more about unwrap. Unwrap, it's some it's a part of the error propagation. So it simply gets the value from the OK enum or panics. So I need my code to panic, and maybe in a different or a future video we can create a demo or a tutorial about like error propagation. So now I'm good to go. And then in this comparison, I'm iterating on the list of items. I'll say if the item is bigger than max, I just need my max to be equal to the item. And then when I'm ending with the for loop, I'll just return the max. And that's it. So simple code. This means iterate on the list of items. If you find, I get the first item and I assume it is the maximum item, and then I iterate on the rest. If I find anyone that is bigger than the one I picked at the beginning, so it's fine, I can replace it. And now I have the maximum in my hand until I finish iterating over the whole list, and then I return my value. Let's give it a try. I just define list of items, and this of type vector I32, and I write some random numbers. What's wrong? List of items. Okay. Oh, yeah, my God. So yeah, here I call I32, and then I use the macro. Yeah, that's it. So now I have a list of items, and then I just print the max number is, and then I'll go with my function max and a reference to the vector, and it should work fine. Yeah, max number is 9, and we are good. So the next step, so now I have my functionality up and running, but I have another problem. If I change the list type from integer 32 to a float 64, this won't compile, and because of like the difference of the data type. This function is expecting I32, but I'm passing F64, and this won't compile and won't work. And an if solution, I can create like a function max underscore integer or a function max underscore float and so on for every data type I want. This is very naive, and this will contradict with the problem of avoid any code duplication, because the function that we will duplicate, it will exactly have the same code except the data type of the argument. So it doesn't make sense I create all of those functions to create or to run the same logic. So instead of that, we'll touch on the Rust generics. And here in the Rust generics, like generic types are telling the compiler or telling Rust it's just a placeholder. So instead of defining the I32 here, I'll tell the compiler, I'll pass you anything here. I'll pass you like a generic type, and this type can be figured out in the runtime. So the compiler like won't mind. Um, so the way we can do it is next to the function name, we will define a new type, and this using angle brackets and using any letter you like. For simplicity, I'm using T capital because it's camel case on Rust, dynamic conventions, or camel case and T for type. So I'm using this generic type. So this function will use generic type T, and here it will accept a vector, a reference of a vector of any type T, and then it will return as well a reference to type T. If I run this, it won't compile, but like let's run it and fix it together. Yeah, it won't compile because this type needs to implement this trait, this comparison trait, and this makes sense. If you told Rust compiler that you want to pass a generic type, and there are so many generic types in the language, and not all the types can be compared with greater than, equal, or less than sign. So we cannot do this to all the types. So instead of that, we will scope the comparison or scope this generic type here to the ones that implementing the trait, this trait or the comparison trait. To do this, you just add a colon and then we just implement this trait, and this trait is mentioned here in the compiler, and the compiler is very efficient and useful in giving the hints on how to fix things. This is one of the biggest or the strongest points about the Rust compiler. Now I implemented this trait, and now it should run. Yeah, same result. So it's running, but instead of like defining a specific concrete type, I'm passing a generic type or a dynamic type. For simplicity, I just copy those two lines and then change the vector type from i32 to be i64. Sorry, to be float 64. I use a float point number, and then I'll just write any random numbers. And let's see what will happen. And it's working fine. And just to finalize this tutorial, I'll use a vector of chars or cars or like characters. So here I will just pass it a couple of chars or letters. So I start with C, D, and E. And then the maximum letter is, and let's see. And yeah, it's E. So this is the end of this tutorial and video. I tried here to touch on the Rust generics and like teach you how to create an abstracted function using generics to work on different data types. As I mentioned in my previous videos, I'm still in the learning phase, Rust learning phase. I'd love to hear from you, hear your feedback, and I really appreciate all the questions, all the stuff I'm having here and on my LinkedIn. For sure, there are better resolutions or code that is better than this because I'm still learning, but I love to like check and read your code. So please don't hesitate to send me any feedback, any code. I'd love to learn and scale up. Thanks for your time. I hope this video and the other videos add value to you, and see you in the next video. Bye bye.